Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone you've grown to care about deeply. There's warmth in the room, maybe even laughter, the kind that rises from the chest. Not superficial, but real. Yet as the evening deepens and the wine fades to silence, something begins to shift. A familiar chill. You ask them something vulnerable, something about closeness, commitment, future. And in their eyes, something flickers. A retreat. A disappearance behind the eyes. Not anger, not defiance, just absence. They are still there physically, but their soul has already stepped back into the shadows. And once again, you are left staring into the hollow echo of someone who can't meet you where you are. Why does this feel familiar? Why does your life feel like a carousel of emotional unavailability? Different faces, same vacancy. You've read the articles, you've listened to the advice. Set boundaries. Love yourself more. Don't chase those who don't choose you. And yet none of it seems to touch that strange gravitational pull. Why you keep finding yourself attracted to those who are wounded, evasive, unpredictable. People who give just enough to ignite hope, and then vanish the moment real intimacy approaches. What if this isn't random? What if your unconscious is orchestrating this pattern with the precision of an ancient ritual, summoning these people not in spite of your wounds, but because of them? Carl Jung once warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What if what feels like fate is actually the psychic reenactment of something deeper, something rooted not in choice, but in psychological necessity? What if, beneath your adult mind, your child self is still at the controls, compelled to recreate an emotional atmosphere that mirrors your earliest attachments? No matter how painful, there's something haunting in that idea, that love, instead of being a conscious act of connection, could instead be a reenactment of trauma dressed up in romance. And maybe the reason you are drawn to those who cannot love you back is because, in some unspeakable way, that absence feels like home. Ask yourself, why does chaos feel more thrilling than safety? Why does being truly seen feel more terrifying than being ignored? Why does emotional unavailability light a fire in your chest, while genuine presence makes you question their motives? These aren't just questions of preference. They're questions of shadow, of the parts of you buried so deep you don't even know they're speaking. What if the pain you feel in these relationships isn't just heartbreak but a sacred message? A mirror, a whisper from the unconscious, a signal that something ancient and unhealed is running the show. And if so, what is that thing? What is it inside of you that needs to be near someone who can't fully receive you? Why is your desire wired for disappointment? The answer isn't simple. It's not found in pop psychology lists or 5-step fixes. No, this answer requires something deeper, a descent into the underworld of the psyche. Because to understand why you attract the emotionally unavailable, you must first understand what parts of you are emotionally exiled. This isn't about blame, it's about revelation. Jung believed that we are haunted by what we reject in ourselves, and that the people we attract are often the unconscious reflections of those inner ghosts. So maybe it's not about why they disappear. Maybe it's about why you keep opening the door. And if so, what are you really searching for when you reach for someone who isn't reaching back? What truth about yourself have you been too afraid to uncover? Because perhaps, just perhaps, the emotionally unavailable are not a curse, but a calling, a cryptic invitation from the hidden parts of your soul, begging to be seen. The real question is, will you answer it? And with that unsettling thought, We step into the deeper layers, where ancient wounds, philosophical truths, and psychological archetypes begin to converge. There's a phrase often whispered in Jungian circles: the wound is the place where the light enters you. But what they don't always tell you is that some wounds take on a life of their own. They don't simply ache. They shape. They guide. They choose your lovers, your longings, your suffering. Now imagine this: a child who learns very early that love is not something that simply is. It's something that must be earned, negotiated, chased. Love becomes a performance. Safety becomes conditional. Attention flickers like candlelight, and the child learns to tiptoe through emotional minefields with quiet desperation, hoping that if they are perfect, silent, invisible, or extraordinary, they will be loved. Fast forward 20 years. That child is now in adult form, but the emotional blueprint remains. They're still seeking what they were denied. Not consciously, of course. They believe they're choosing love, but they're reenacting the same emotional choreography, giving more than they receive, waiting for someone to finally see them, running after the ghost of validation that never fully arrives. This is the hidden root of attraction to emotional unavailability. Not a flaw in logic, but a deeply embedded psychic imprint. Carl Jung called this the complex, a cluster of emotionally charged ideas, stored in the unconscious, that continue to influence our behavior in irrational ways. You don't just fall in love, you fall into the orbit of your complexes. The unavailable partner is not just a person. They are a symbolic match to your internal architecture. In other words, you are not in love with them. You are in love with what they represent. The absence, the chase, the possibility of rewriting the script. And here lies the paradox. The more unavailable someone is, the more they mirror your earliest experiences of what love felt like. Distant, uncertain, intoxicatingly scarce. This scarcity isn't a turnoff. It's home. Now step back and consider the philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties. You can't see them, but they bind you." The invisible thread, in this case, is the unconscious compulsion to repair the past through the present. You're not just seeking love, you're seeking resolution. And the emotionally unavailable partner offers a dangerous hope. If I can make this person love me, I will prove that I am finally worthy. But this is a trap. Arthur Schopenhauer, in his Bleak Brilliance, warned us that desire is suffering, that we do not want what we have, we want what we lack. And the unavailable lover is the embodiment of this lack, perpetually out of reach, perpetually desired. But here's where the psychological fuses with the existential. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free, that we create meaning through our choices, but often flee from that freedom by surrendering to bad faith. Choosing the emotionally unavailable isn't always about blindness. Sometimes it's an escape, a distraction from the terrifying responsibility of choosing someone who might actually see you. Because if someone truly sees you, loves you, accepts you, you lose your excuse. You can no longer say, "They didn't love me because I wasn't enough." You would have to confront the truth that your suffering was a choice, and that is unbearable to the part of you still ruled by shame. Gabor Mate, who drew heavily from Jung and trauma research, said it best. When we are not seen, we begin to disappear from ourselves. But what if you disappeared so long ago that you don't even remember what it's like to be present with someone who stays? The emotionally unavailable partner is a mirror, not of your worthlessness, but of your forgotten self. A self that was once told, "You are too much," or "You are not enough," and believed it so deeply that it became your inner truth. And now, whenever someone offers affection without conditions, your system short-circuits. You feel bored, suffocated, distrustful. Why? Because your nervous system doesn't recognize safety. It only recognizes familiarity. That's not love. That's trauma bonding. But no one teaches us this. Instead, we are raised in a culture that glorifies the chase, that romanticizes longing, that equates emotional turbulence with passion and detachment with power. Aldous Huxley once said, "Experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you." And yet, so many of us are not doing anything with our experience. We are merely reliving it, hoping that this time the ending will change. But the ending doesn't change, not until you do. This is the silent war between your conscious desire to be loved and your unconscious loyalty to the pain that shaped you. You are not broken for being drawn to the emotionally unavailable. You are merely reenacting a myth you never consented to. A myth written in childhood, reinforced by society, and buried beneath years of self-blame and confusion. But every myth has a shadow, and every shadow, if faced, can become the door to liberation. Now the question emerges, not as a whisper but as a scream. What has your suffering been trying to teach you? And are you finally ready to listen? Because if you are, the ground beneath your patterns will begin to shift. And the very thing that has kept you trapped may be the key to setting you free. In the next section, we will follow the consequences of this unconscious loyalty, how it silently shapes your life, hijacks your identity, and distorts your understanding of love. What happens when the mask becomes your face? When the pattern becomes your prison? Let's go deeper. Imagine this. You're walking through a house that's been your home for years, but something feels off. The walls are lined with mirrors, but none reflect your true image. Each one shows a different version of you. The pleaser, the savior, the mysterious one, the independent woman, the stoic man. None of them are you. And yet you've worn these masks so long, you begin to forget there was ever a face beneath them. This is what happens when your patterns stop being wounds and start becoming your identity. The moment you internalize the emotional unavailability of others, a terrifying shift occurs. You begin to believe that you must be the reason why love keeps slipping away. You don't see the systemic patterns, the invisible trauma scripts, or the unconscious forces at work. You see a mirror, and it tells you that you are unlovable. Too much or not enough. Here lies one of the cruelest ironies. We think we are choosing love, but in reality, we are choosing pain that feels familiar enough to pass as love. It's not just the relationships that suffer, it's your sense of self. You become the person who always gives more than they receive. You become addicted to potential. You wait for text messages like a starving person waits for crumbs. You interpret silence as mystery, aloofness as power, and inconsistency as chemistry. Why? Because your nervous system, programmed through repetition, equates absence with intimacy. It no longer trusts stillness, wholeness, peace. In fact, when someone is available, consistent, and open, you start to recoil. You may even sabotage it. This is not self-destruction. This is survival logic. Your entire body has been wired to distrust safety. And this is not your fault. Neuroscience tells us that the brain forms neural pathways around emotional repetition. The more often you feel a certain way in relationships, the more your brain begins to assume that this feeling is normal. Comfort becomes suspicious, Drama becomes addictive. And love? Love becomes indistinguishable from longing. Here's what's worse. The longer you stay in these patterns, the more you start contorting yourself into roles you think will earn love. You become hyper-independent, never asking for anything. Or you become overly accommodating, abandoning your needs to preserve the illusion of connection. You smile when you want to cry. You nod when you want to scream. You stay silent when your soul is begging to speak. This slow erosion of self is the cost of chasing emotionally unavailable people. You don't just lose love, you lose yourself. But that's just the beginning. Society, steeped in myths about romance, glorifies this dysfunction. We are sold the narrative of the one who changes them, the cold-hearted lover who melts for you, the emotionally detached person who opens up because you are different. We watch films where inconsistency is mistaken for mystery, where the chase is more thrilling than the connection. And so we internalize the idea that we must work for love, that love is not a sanctuary but a test, that if it's not hard, it's not real. But Carl Jung warned us of this mass hypnosis. He believed that the modern individual is spiritually starved, psychologically fragmented, and cut off from the unconscious. In such a fragmented state, people cling to myths, not to heal, but to escape. And here is the most terrifying consequence of all. You start choosing pain, not because you enjoy it, but because it confirms what you secretly believe about yourself. And the more you choose it, the more your belief calcifies. I am only worthy of love I have to fight for. I am not lovable unless I'm earning it. If I just try harder, they'll stay. This is not a belief. This is a prison, and its bars are invisible, made of memory, trauma, and unconscious loyalty to the emotional blueprint you inherited, not created. But what happens when the prison starts to crack? At first, there's confusion, a growing numbness. You start to notice how your body tightens when you don't hear from them. You feel your stomach drop at each ambiguous message. You tell yourself, it's okay, they're just busy. But a deeper part of you knows you are performing emotional CPR on a relationship that was never alive. And eventually, something breaks. Not in them, in you. A quiet implosion. A realization that hits like a cold wind. This isn't love. This is self-abandonment dressed up in desire. And now the question is no longer, why do they keep pulling away? The question becomes, why do I keep following? This shift is not comfortable. In fact, it can feel like grief. You begin mourning the illusion, the fantasy of what could have been, the idea that if you had just been better, more patient, more loving, more whatever, they would have stayed. But in this grief, something sacred begins to awaken. A part of you that had been locked away during the performance. A part of you that never agreed to shrink, chase, or disappear just to be loved. And with it comes a deeper truth. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. But this realization is dangerous to your old identity. The masks don't survive truth. The roles don't survive awakening. And the system you built to keep yourself emotionally safe begins to dissolve. This is the cost of awareness, but it is also the beginning of liberation. You begin to notice patterns in your parents, your past partners, even your culture. You see how emotional unavailability isn't just personal, it's systemic, it's inherited. And now the decision is before you. Continue the legacy or break it. Carl Jung wrote that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And this is where we are now, staring into the darkness, not to be consumed by it, but to finally name it. Because once something has a name, it can be seen. And once it's seen, it can be changed. In the next section, we begin the rebellion, The radical shift in perspective that dismantles the illusion. What if everything you believed about love, identity, and self-worth was a lie passed down through generations? What if there's a way out? Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a forest you've walked your entire life. The path is familiar. Every root, every thorn, every detour toward disappointment. You know this route by heart. But today, you do something different. You stop walking. You turn around. And for the first time, you realize the trail you've been following was never meant to lead you home. It was meant to keep you lost. This is the beginning of rebellion. Not a loud, violent outburst, but a quiet, sacred refusal. A refusal to keep repeating what you didn't choose. A refusal to keep confusing suffering for love. A refusal to shrink, chase, twist, beg. Because awakening always begins with refusal. Now here's the radical truth, one that dismantles everything. You were taught about love. You do not need to earn what is already yours. Let that settle. Let it rage against every neuron programmed by childhood wounds. Let it scream against every story that told you to wait, to beg, to prove. You were not born to be half-loved. You were not designed to be tolerated, ghosted, breadcrumbed, or decoded like some cryptic puzzle. Love is not a riddle. It is not earned through suffering. It is revealed through truth. But to reclaim this truth, you must confront the most disorienting question of all. Who am I without my pain? Without the chase? Without the validation loop? Without the fantasy that if you just fix them, you'll fix you? This is where most people turn back. Because freedom is terrifying when your identity is built on captivity. The masks feel safer than the face beneath them. The familiar ache of unavailability is easier to tolerate than the raw uncertainty of being truly seen. But rebellion demands risk. And the risk is this: to be known, to be whole, to be alone if necessary, rather than perform for scraps of connection. Carl Jung believed in the process of individuation, the psychological and spiritual journey toward integrating the fragmented parts of the self into a unified whole. He taught that healing does not mean becoming someone else. It means remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. And to do this, you must turn inward. Not to indulge in self-blame, but to become dangerously honest. To ask yourself, why do I feel safer with people who hurt me than with people who see me? What part of me still believes I must earn love through suffering? Whose voice am I still trying to silence with someone else's affection? These questions are not comfortable. They are knives that cut through illusion. But they are also keys, because every lie you untangle frees another piece of your soul. And here's the counterintuitive revelation. Healing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like dying, because part of you is dying. The persona that chased ghosts, the self-concept built on being needed but never nourished. The story that told you love is pain in costume. You begin to grieve, but not just the person who left, or the ones who never showed up. You grieve who you became just to be loved. You grieve the moments you stayed when your heart begged you to leave. You grieve the silence you swallowed to keep the peace. You grieve your own abandonment of self. And in this grief, something extraordinary happens. You start choosing differently, not louder, not angrier, but wiser. You begin noticing red flags for what they are. Not invitations to fix, but indicators to leave. You stop confusing detachment with depth. You stop idolizing the unavailable. You lose interest in chaos dressed as passion. You begin to regulate your nervous system so it no longer equates love with adrenaline. You find peace in consistency. You find beauty in being seen rather than chased. This is how rebellion becomes ritual. And it doesn't happen in a single cinematic moment. It happens in choices. Small, quiet, often painful ones. Saying no when your old self would have said yes. Blocking a number not out of anger but self-respect. Going to bed without rereading the texts, rereading the pain. Sitting with the loneliness without numbing it with fantasy. It is in these moments that you stop abandoning yourself. Jean-Paul Sartre believed we are condemned to be free. But with that freedom comes the terrifying weight of choice. And in healing, this weight is profound. Because the more you heal, the less you can blame. The less you can unconsciously reenact your wounds. The more responsible you become for who you let in and who you let go. And this responsibility is sacred. Because now you are no longer choosing partners to complete. You are choosing them to meet you. And if they cannot, you walk away. Not because you're cold, but because you're finally warm enough inside to know that solitude is not suffering. It's space for truth to live. This is not about becoming invulnerable. It's about becoming authentic. True rebellion is not about rejecting love. It's about rejecting the lies you were told about what love is supposed to feel like. It's about writing new myths, ones where the protagonist doesn't bleed endlessly to be chosen, but bleeds once to be free. And from that freedom emerges a new kind of attraction, one that is not based on trauma, neediness, or unresolved longing, but on resonance, clarity, presence. You stop looking for the emotionally unavailable, because you are no longer emotionally unavailable to yourself. This is the ultimate rebellion. To stay when it's real, to walk when it's not, to become the home you were always searching for in others. And from this place, a new kind of partner becomes visible, one you couldn't even recognize before, because your pain filtered your perception. Now you no longer see through the eyes of fear. You see through the eyes of truth. In the final section, we will descend into the core of this transformation, to uncover the ultimate truth that makes everything finally make sense. The revelation that turns your pain into power, your past into prophecy, and your longing into light. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror. Not one warped by longing, not one clouded by shame. For the first time, it shows your true reflection. No masks, no distortions, just you. Eyes wide, heart open, a flicker of something ancient waking in your chest. And suddenly it hits you. It was never about them. Not the ones who ghosted, not the ones who breadcrumbed, not the emotionally unavailable. Lovers who drew you in like fire and left you shivering in the ash. They were just symbols, echoes, mirrors of a wound you weren't ready to name. The real battle was always within. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this is the moment you understand what he meant. Because in chasing the unavailable, what you were really chasing was yourself. The part you had exiled, the part you believed was unworthy of love, the part that never got to speak when the world told you to stay quiet. You weren't looking for love. You were looking for your lost self. The unavailable were simply keys. They unlocked pain, yes, but also memory. They reminded you of where you'd been cut, silenced, ignored, and in doing so, they led you home, if you were brave enough to listen. This is the paradox. The ones who hurt you were not the final enemy. They were the gatekeepers, not to be forgiven for their harm, but to be understood for their role in your awakening. They exposed your unconscious loyalties, those hidden vows you made as a child. I'll be quiet if it keeps the peace. I'll be strong so no one leaves. I'll make myself small so they'll stay. And so you did. You became everything except yourself. But now you remember, not as an idea, as a knowing, not with your mind, with your soul. You were never broken. You were adapting, and now that you no longer need to adapt to survive, your true self begins to emerge. Not the perfect one, not the always healed one, but the real one. The one who no longer needs to perform for love. The one who doesn't abandon themselves when someone else pulls away. The one who can sit in their truth, even if it means sitting alone. This is the final realization. Wholeness was never about being chosen by another. It was about choosing yourself, again and again. In every conversation, in every silence, in every moment you want to chase, fix, explain. You choose you, and this choice is not loud. It's quiet, grounded, eternal. It means leaving the party early because your body says, enough. It means deleting the message before it's sent because you realize you're trying to prove your worth. It means holding your inner child when she says, "Why don't they want me?" and replying, "I do. I want you." This is reparenting. This is individuation. This is transcendence. Viktor Frankl wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose. And in our choice lies our growth, our freedom. This is what you're reclaiming now. The space, the breath between the text and your reaction, the pause between rejection and self-destruction, the sacred stillness where truth has room to speak. And it tells you, you were never too much. You were just never met by someone who could hold your depth. But now you hold it. The irony is almost too much to bear. The entire time you thought you were being rejected by others. What you were really experiencing was a call to return to yourself. And now that you've answered it, something shifts. You stop asking why they left. You stop trying to win them back. You stop looking for closure from someone who couldn't even open. Instead, you begin asking, what does my body need in this moment? Does this connection expand me or shrink me? Can I stay true to myself, even if they leave? And these questions don't just change how you date. They change how you exist. You begin living from the inside out, not waiting for love to save you, but radiating it from the place you finally call home, within. You stop orbiting unavailable people because you are no longer emotionally exiled from your own soul. You stop seeing love as a transaction and start seeing it as a mirror. It reflects what you believe about yourself, and now you believe you are worthy of being seen, held, known. And when you meet someone now, you don't ask, will they stay? You ask, can I stay true to myself in their presence? This is the new paradigm. Not love as a performance, but love as a meeting point between two whole people. Not perfect, but present. No more chasing, no more decoding, no more waiting for them to change because you've changed. And in doing so, the world you once inhabited begins to dissolve. The old gravitational pull, the toxic magnetism of pain, loses its power. You feel it, like shedding a second skin, like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were dreaming. And maybe, just maybe, you look back on all those heartbreaks, not with bitterness, but with reverence, because they didn't destroy you. They delivered you to this moment, to this truth, to this self, the one you abandoned, the one you reclaimed, the one you now refuse to betray. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The moment you stop chasing unavailable love and start becoming the source of the love you were seeking all along. Do not look for healing at the feet of those who broke you. Rupi Kaur, but perhaps even more powerful. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumis, let them echo in your mind as the screen fades to black. Let them haunt you, heal you, reshape you. Because now you know, you were never meant to chase love. You were meant to remember it. And now, you do.